candidates are usually a bit optimistic on how much their interviewer trusts them in job interviews. And this trust gap has only widened as of recently, to the extent that employers such as Google are doing their best to educate their candidates against the use of modern day trickery such as the AI in their job interviews. I made a video with examples if you want to take a look. So the reality is we live in a very weird job market, because when you have a ton of layoffs, you'd expect a good number of qualified candidates, and when you also have this environment, you'd expect people to take interviews super seriously and do their best to give their most genuine type of answers. Well, I can tell you in reality from the other side, when I interview and I see people preparing their story banks all the time, the trend is unfortunately not the right one. Okay, so trust is an essential topic you must focus on if you want to pass interviews with high-performing companies. Now, how do you build trust with your interviewer in job interviews? I'm going to talk about 3 elements here. The first one is the scientific way. Okay, so behaviorally speaking, there is such a thing as the trust questions in job interviews, also known as the conflict questions. Tell me about the time when you received tough feedback from your manager. Okay, so how do you resolve conflict? Well, you do it by building trust. Okay, for example, you would come up with some data and with some great communication, and this would be the 2 core elements where you'd resolve this. Now, what happens is that many candidates shoot themselves in the foot with things such as you talk about a conflict that was a monumental mistake you made, which had an existential impact to your past role, so that's not a great way to sell yourself on these things during job interviews. Or other candidates try to choose inappropriate stories in the sense of non-functional conflicts, such as a software engineer talking about someone else who did not like their face, instead of focusing on a functional conflict. Maybe some software algorithm wasn't working as supposed to, so you came up with the data and with some communication, and you regained trust inside your team. Okay, or maybe your interviewer would reframe those trust questions slightly more counterintuitively, because these questions are so easy to spot, to predict these days. They would ask you, how would you handle conflict in your future team? And what happens here is that most candidates will talk hypothetically about their magic framework, as if they were psychologists, in building trust inside their teams. So long story short, focus on answering these conflict questions well, because also there's the remote work trend. And if you've been working remotely, you would struggle picking examples of conflict when compared to someone who's working a day job, an office job, so to speak. Right? The second thing I like to talk about here when it comes to building trust in these job interviews is some of the people I work with also interview candidates. And they all the time tell me that, hey, Dan, I wish, those candidates would listen to me a bit more during these job interviews, because whenever they say something wrong, I'm doing my best to convey this to them. Hey, you know what? You're going in the opposite direction. I don't want you to go there. This is not the example that would play to your favor. It's just common that people make mistakes. It's natural that candidates make mistakes in job interviews, but when you do not acknowledge that mistake, that it's, when it's actually game over, So my suggestion to you would be during job interviews to listen, keep an eye on your interviewer, because we're all human beings, we all have biases. And even if someone does not want to tell you that you're going in the wrong direction, they will maybe do something to indicate something suspicious going on during your job interview. And if you catch that, you will have the opportunity to self-correct, to course correct, and get back on track. Okay, so listening, keeping an eye on your interviewer is another big one, an essential element of building trust and keeping and preserving trust in job interviews. And the third thing I like to talk about here when it comes to trust builders would be the cosmetics, if you want the impression-based hiring, the small talk. Okay, if you connect well with your interviewer from the beginning, you'll be also more likely to read them well during these job interviews and have a more favorable outcome, score well on trust with them too. Or more open candidates If you score well on openness, you will also likely be interpreted as someone who's more trustworthy. If you want to do something extreme, you could also consider sharing your story bank with your interviewers before, during, or after your job interview. If you have a great story bank, you should understand that 95% of candidates cannot go there, right? So openness would be another one. And finally, you could use your own language in job interviews. This sells these days a lot better than many candidates realize, because you have the AI trend where people are trying to over-polish and to impress in the wrong way in job interviews, when interviewers are looking for genuine candidates. So even if you cannot speak English perfectly, even if your way of communicating ideas could be improved, so to speak, but if you score well on clarity of thought, that's all it matters for the job interviews. And if you sound genuine, that's also when you increase your ability to build trust. So I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.